Alright, we're doing a mid-year list for 2025. The reason why I didn't do this last year is because there just was not a lot of stuff that I loved. So I just didn't have enough material to make a good year-end list. Like if you saw my best albums of the mid-decade, there were only 5 albums released in 2024 that made that list. But 2025 has been way better. Like there are so many artists and bands that have already made amazing music and they have released new music and it sounds amazing, and then there are a lot of artists that sound even better than I remember. So yeah, I'm really excited to make this video. Let's jump right in.
In the forest, face painted, fingertips black with charcoal. I waited and waited. Anything I gave, I waited. Same as I.
Alright, so here's the thing about Billy Woods and mid-year lists. You know, his projects, they are bleak, they're raw, they eat away at you, and like that's especially true when he essentially describes his own words this time around as difficult to digest and analyze. So his albums, they grow on you a ton over the course of a year. And I guess I don't like this as much as Maps or Aesop, but I underrated even those records back in their respective years. So for now, you know, I have 6 months to decide whether the reality in this album is one I'm ready to face. I definitely wasn't expecting this to slip into my mid-year list, but it's another year, and every year for me is one where I struggle to explain why I'm enjoying a heavily Deftones inspired project more than any actual Deftones album. But yeah, I think the production here is excellent with the perfect amount of bite, and I love the djent and shoegaze elements as well. Check it out. It's a side project of Thornhill, a consistent list topper for me, but with this veering into pure, harrowing cacophony without the stunning, jaw-dropping magic of his primary alias works, Thornhill's name alone might not be enough to justify loving this so much, and I wind up split between whether this was a necessary follow-up to Sky 100, continuing the streak of projects noisier and more abstract than the last, or simply a magnificent tour de force with little replay value. I was blown away by this on first listen, but for where this project will settle, only time will tell. This might be 2025's equivalent to Maruja's Nocturne, where the vehement instrumental display provides enough emotional richness for a full record, but instead we have a compact, barely 20-minute EP with song structures working at maximum efficiency, similar to Black Midi. And I think all these comparisons are praiseworthy. Being as intense and striking as Black Country New Road's debut is nothing to scoff at, and with new releases just on the horizon, I can't wait to see what heights this band will reach.
I feel the pressure raffled under my sweater, the trumpet on the horns, the drummer coming.
To be honest, I wasn't huge on this at first. It doesn't have the rawness that I Lie Here Buried with My Rings and My Dresses had, but now I understand that Backxwash made a proper artistic choice to shift away from industrial rap, because this is not quite as punishing, but just as thematically intense. The varied production makes the brutal honesty ever so slightly easier to digest, so if you need an entry point into Backxwash's catalog, this might be it. At this point, all of my lists contain at least one slice of indie rock greatness with awesome hooks and colorful instrumentation to boot, especially in the horns here. And with this being my first impression of the band, I'm amazed by the amount of potential here. Louis Parsons' vocals have immense expressive power, and I can honor the suburban questioning as well. A tad inconsistent production-wise to fully seal the deal, but the playlist material that can still be found makes this more than worthwhile.
Show up at the get down, joking now, holy as a
tell me if I'm forgetting anybody, but I think Aesop Rock might have the longest ongoing hot streak in hip-hop. It's been over 2 decades since he even remotely missed, and after hearing this album, the momentum shows no signs of slowing down. His ear for hooks and production is as sharp as ever, and his wordplay and storytelling create yet another essential addition to his discography, with this album covering environmental factors on his psyche that could easily be misjudged as supernatural. This is one of the best rap albums of the year so far. Let's see how well it holds up to Jid and Clips.
Sailing away, feeling faded and I'm not okay.
It is a little disappointing how few people seem to be excited for this release, but seeing how an artist who made an even better album this year takes great inspiration from James McMurtry, I expect great things from him, and that's exactly what we got here. In a way, one of my favorite things about him is the sense of ease I have when hearing new material from him, knowing that such a talented artist who has been in the game for so long definitely won't disappoint. This is one of her most soothing works to date, so dreamy and encapsulating that there's the question of whether the soft focused textures create something worth returning to, or better off as a lingering memory. In other words, whether this album stands up to her more memorable past material. Unfortunately for me, Ichiko Aoba, like usual, seems to overcome that problem magically, creating a delicate aquatic ambience that reels me in like a riptide, unremarkable on the surface but overwhelming in the moment. Maybe I'll eventually break free from the spell that her music binds me under, but it seems that 2025 is not that year.
I'm singing this song about loving all the people that you come to hate.
This is the second project this year where a lot of the magic comes from being compared to much more renowned and influential acts, then thriving in the fact that they measure up at all. Here's Jesse Wells, and even I didn't find his singer-songwriter album last year too worthwhile, but he brought some excellent rock grooves into his mixes, and now we've reached Bob Dylan levels of wit and resonance. And an album like this is exactly what I love to hear from excellent singer-songwriters like Jesse Wells. An album that's full of little details while inviting you to re-listen enough times to spot them. Apparently the hype train for this guy has been running since last year. I'm definitely on board now.
Get your connect on the phone and let him know you got the paper in your pocket for him and he need to run it.
It's hard for me to accept how I view the role this album serves, because while the visceral commentary is as dense as ever, the glitchy zaniness is a bit too distracting. In turn, I seek this album out for the insane hip-hop versatility rarely seen elsewhere. I still prefer when the themes are at the forefront like in Clipping's previous stuff, but this is still one of the most compelling listens of the year on the sound palette alone. I also stayed up until midnight to hear this, so I'm glad it was all worth it. Okay, as much as I've admired and remained updated on Jane Remover's experimental and versatile aliases, this is the record I've wanted her to release deep down, where she compiles many of my favorite bass elements of her earlier discography, namely the pop and frailty, while keeping the production notch up to 11, and then she brings manic hip-hop sounds into the mix, resulting in this maximalist glitchy mayhem that's accessible due to the incredible hooks, energy, and quirky dance beats, and more so the sheer sonic overload. This is a tracklist so stacked with highlights that nothing winds up a highlight. If the consistently genre-splitting, occasionally genre-inventing soundscapes weren't evidence enough that Jane Remover is on a trajectory to watch out for, this album seals the deal. Sewer was a band I needed to revisit in 2025, not only because I had an unfair first impression of them with the transitional origins, but also because within my listening habits, they are an excellent counterpart to Alcest, where the soaring melodies are just as gripping, but more holistic rather than brazen. And it means a lot to me that Sewer managed to intertwine the melodic motifs across the grand instrumentation so intricately that there's not a single moment that I'm not absorbed by. They have a formula with sheer vigor that creates phenomenal climactic moments on their own. The Celtic instrumentation against the thunderous tremolos is a breathtaking 1-2 combo, but both the metal and folk styles have the timbral aptitude to shape climactic and resonant crescendos that result in every second of this record being equally striking in its own way. And that's why Sewer is so one of a kind, especially with one of the tracks here being plain and simple folk. They consistently make the most out of their sound, and they hit a home run once again. I kinda regret comparing Sewer to Alcest because now I'm comparing Death Heaven to Alcest as well, and I look too obsessive, but this time the parallels are much stronger, and not just because we're in Black Ace territory now. Out of nowhere, Death Heaven dropped their best album, despite the fan favorite Sunbather releasing over a decade prior, and I'm left speechless by the sheer intensity, which makes writing reviews very annoying. What's also irritating though is that there are very blatant weak spots and structural flaws in the track list, but this is just way too fierce and passionate, and I'm kind of forced to submit to the visceral intent of this band, whether they play things out effectively or not. So yeah, I am protesting my enjoyment of this album, but I'm also not going to lie about how much I love this. Maybe my nitpicks will get a hold of me eventually, but with the few months I've spent with this record so far, this is where I currently stand.
I was a gravel weed and I needed you to raise me, and you couldn't reach me once I felt like I was raised.
Yes, Jason Isbell has made way better. There is no way that this stands up to Weathervanes or The Natural Sound or something more than Free, but for an album with only acoustic guitar for instrumentation, this is the perfect spotlight of Jason Isbell's top-notch songwriting, because this is following his divorce with Amanda Shires and consequently the fall of the 400 unit. It's possibly his messiest album, and between the lyrical themes and the light instrumentation, this is both a difficult and easy listen at the same time, and I've ended up returning to this a ton, and this winds up my favorite album of the past 6 months. So yeah, check it out, and probably the rest of his stuff while you're at it. But also, don't be surprised if something better comes out in the following 6 months, because the door is still wide open. This is in no way running away with the top spot this year, and I'm excited to see what 2025 still has to offer. Goodbye.